Okay, so this is going to be the part 3 and most likely concluding segment of this video regarding, or this presentation that I did on my conversion and deconversion from Mormonism, the doctrines that I found most noticeably irreconcilable to LDS truth and authority claims of the one true Israelite God, restoring the one true gospel of Jesus Christ through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or what became the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a whole lot of other Mormon, I don't want to say splinter groups. I mean, the Brighamite splinter group became the biggest one, right? It's not where the Smiths went, where the founding, where Joseph Smith's widow, mother, and brothers went. So that's in another video. One I did in Independence, Missouri, about a year ago, I think. Okay, so the Joseph Smith's actual history is much different from what they taught in the church regarding other women. Also, I learned that Joseph Smith took the wives, according to Mormon Doctrine, really, of 11 men who were members of the church, most of them faithful, believing members of the LDS church. Some of them were on missions. He called them on a mission, or said that God did, or Jesus did, and then proposed to their wives to be his spiritual wife or eternal wife, okay? So that certainly wasn't taught in church, but those stories are tragic. Orson Hyde was an apostle called to go to set apart for the gathering of the Jews the land of Jerusalem. Joseph Smith proposed to his wife to be his wife for eternity while Orson Hyde was gone, and so he was sealed to her, and then most likely shared the sexual benefits, although that's not provable in this life. So according to Mormon theology, he stole the wife of this faithful Latter-day Saint apostle for all eternity, along with, like I said, another 10 dudes. So that was horrific and disgusting to me. If you're faithfully trying to be a good member of the church and earn your salvation, your exaltation, having the prophet steal your wife for all eternity, if you're in love with her, that's pretty much about as bad as it gets. So there were guys that said things like, if Joseph Smith asked me for my wife, I'd tell him to go to hell. Well, there were people who believed firmly enough that they did so, and Henry Jacobs was one of those. He stood as a witness in the ordinance of Joseph Smith being sealed to his 6-month pregnant wife, and later was entirely separated from his wife by Brigham Young on the, I believe, winter quarters, told him it's time for men who are standing in other men's shoes to step out of them. You are standing in, the wrong shoes here, pal, Henry Jacobs, because Joseph Smith is basically the rightful owner of your wife. Women are basically property within Jewish and Christian theology, especially, as we go back to the patriarchs, and legally at that time as well. Yeah, he said, I'm standing in Joseph Smith's shoes as proxy. Your wife and children belong to him, and now I'm taking over, so I'll be screwing your wife, and you can go find somebody else. But make sure that she's not someone else's, soulmate or something to that effect. You can read the quote. It's so disgusting and so horrific. Anyway, I didn't learn that until about 2010. When I happened upon a site called Honoring the Wives of Joseph Smith. And this is, in fact, verifiable LDS, history from church-friendly sources. But at any rate, it's horrendous. And so these women were sometimes taken just as, in Mormon doctrine for eternity, which is, if you believe, Mormon doctrine, it's horrendous. You're losing your family forever. And or they were being taken or shared basically, by Joseph Smith. It's so sickening. But why isn't that in your LDS manuals for Sunday school, right? So anyway, there's a glaring issue. That is, it is not okay. Okay. And there are all sorts of women who were accosted by Joseph Smith, who said that God had revealed they were to be his spiritual wives. Orson Hyde's wife, or Orson Pratt's wife, Sarah, who turned him down, told him to go pound sand or something like that. And when he said, "I've long looked upon you with favor, and the Lord's revealed to me you're to be one of my spiritual wives, and I hope that you will not, repulse me." But she did repulse him, and she later left the church and said polygamy ruined her husband, who was a good husband before polygamy, etc. She also talked about his abortion doctor, who was in the first presidency, John C. Bennett, who got caught, basically, red-handed with being a guy involved in the spiritual wife system, which was related but different from what you're taught about. In polygamy, there was not necessarily any marriage or sealing, even though marriage was, of course, in violation of anti-bigamy laws in all states that Joseph Smith was ever in, as far as I'm aware. But the spiritual wife system came from the Cochranites and basically allowed kind of a free love thing. And, if people are consenting, I suppose that's one thing. If people are being coerced by a religious leader upon whose approval they believe their salvation and exaltation is predicated, you can see how manipulative that can be. So whether it's the 14-year-old daughter of Apostle Heber C. Kimball, who was basically coerced into marrying Joseph Smith, or in the spiritual, as a polygamist wife, plural wife sealed, even though it's illegal as a legally and lawfully wedded wife, because Joseph Smith accepted that offer from the Kimballs after they were going to debate whether or not they felt like they could obey his revelation that God wanted him to have Brother Kimball's wife as one of his wives. And then, of course, that was just a test. But I'll take your 14-year-old daughter anyway. So, time after time, we have stuff that's just disgusting and is not actively taught in the LDS Church and violates, in many cases, the changing LDS theology. So I mentioned Joseph Smith went ahead and so that was one of the items that's when I decided, I'm done. I'm done. I prayed and prayed about this, Freemasonry in the temple, and then I came across that, and I was just like, something's really sick here. I'd also seen other things. Some of the things I'm going to relate, I already or I have since learned, and may not have figured into my leaving the church as prominently, or even been something that I was aware of, or completely aware of as I am now. I mentioned Joseph Smith formed in 1820 the Church of Christ. Okay, then later he and Sidney Rigdon renamed the church about 1834, I believe, the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Now in 1838 they changed the name of the church again, probably because the Church of the Latter-day Saints doesn't include any reference to Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ, etc. And in the Book of Mormon, it clearly states, it says, the Jesus character is a real guy in the Book of Mormon, and he's talking to the American Indians called Nephites, the good side of them, the white people. The brown people were the bad people. They got turned brown so that white people wouldn't marry them because they'd be repulsive looking, according to the Book of Mormon. So, any rate, he's telling these Nephite American Indians that the church that they've organized has to have his name in the name of the church. So for 4 years, the living prophet on earth didn't notice that he screwed up and renamed the church a name that's unacceptable according to Jesus in the Book of Mormon. So then the church was named the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, if we look at church historical documents or church, historically related books, we've got very misleading statements regarding the name of the church by Joseph Fielding Smith, a president of the church and church historian. And then we have it reiterated by Gordon Bittner Hinckley, who was the president of the church, but not when he wrote the following. However, it had to be approved by the quorum of the 12 apostles in the first presidency, probably, to be a church-approved material book. And in a book that he wrote, which is called Truth Restored, which is kind of an abbreviated rendition of what I'm doing here, how Mormonism became a thing, a religion. And so restoring the gospel of Jesus Christ is basically what that's about, according to, what the Mormon line of thinking is on that. And so in that, Gordon B. Hinckley, as a church historian and an apostle, writes in a book that was distributed in the church libraries, board libraries, meeting house libraries for many years, including while I was working for the church, a book that stated, now it's got various editions, and some of them might not say the same thing, but I sat down and I saw this book in my mom's bookcase in about 2012, and I grabbed it and started reading. Now, I'd probably read some of it before. I'd read a lot of church books, but I don't know if I read that one cover to cover. But I remember it being in meeting house libraries when I was working for the church. Anyway, Gordon B. Hinckley said, the name of the church was given by divine edict originally as the Church of Jesus Christ. Okay, so divine edict means, basically God speaks commands through his prophet. Well, the church was never named the Church of Jesus Christ, so that's a lie. And then he goes on to say, later, the words of Latter-day Saints was added by inspiration. So God inspired, Jesus inspired, Joseph Smith as the prophet and president of the church later to add on to a name that he had never named the church in the first place. And of course, he doesn't mention the huge fact that it was named the Church of the Latter-day Saints in between the Church of Christ and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So there are at least 3 lies contained within that cover-up of the fact that obviously an all-knowing, unchanging God isn't guiding the Mormon prophets in how to administer the gospel or restore the kingdom of God. He can't even get the name of his own church right? Okay, so that's interesting. In Mormonism, you're taught that through the gift and power of God, that Joseph Smith translated from Reformed Egyptian on gold plates the Book of Mormon, the record that the American Indians had of their voyage from Israel and dealings with Jesus of Nazareth when he appeared on the American continent after his alleged life and resurrection in, Judea, right? So, you see pictures in church publications of Joseph Smith looking intently, either with or without the magic glasses, at the golden plates. Well, the magic glasses basically are not in Mormon scripture called the Urim and Thummim. Urim and Thummim is in the Old Testament and has nothing to do with seer stones. It has to do with a couple of stones on the breastplate of Aaron in the story where that he put that breastplate on to enter the tabernacle. But in an effort to associate something from the Bible with Mormon, theology and history, Sidney, I think it was Oliver Cowdery, started calling it, the seer stone or stones being discussed, the Urim and Thummim. So the truth was, Joseph Smith was practicing magic as a boy and going on treasure hunting excursions guided by a seer stone, which of course is dedicated, consecrated, set apart through witchcraft. You got to say all this mumbo jumbo and words while facing a certain direction and all this stuff. I actually read the spell of how to consecrate or set apart a seer stone. Again, you find Mormon language comes from witchcraft in some instances and Freemasonry. Why is Freemasonry called the craft? Because there's witchcraft incorporated at the higher levels, obviously. So anyway, now, like I said, I'm not saying all witchcraft is evil. A lot of herbalist, the women are maybe practicing white magic and not black magic, but there are those who would talk about the dangers and differences and so forth. But at any rate, it implies autonomy rather than going through a channel in a church where authority is mandated through a corporate body, like the Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, with their religious, with their religion, given to the people, called the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? All these religions, they're the broker between you and the deity. So witchcraft, of course, allows women to, well, men and women, but women especially, to reach out for whatever divine power, inspiration, without going through the patriarchy in this church. So of course it's condemned, it's heresy, and the Bible condemns witches and says you must kill them, just like it says you must kill homosexuals, right? Male homosexuals are specifically named in Leviticus chapter 20? Yeah. Where it says, if a man lie with another man, he should surely be put to death. And it also states that witches should be put to death. So anything that competes with the Jewish patriarchy tends to have pretty severe penalties. But that's all Old Testament, so who cares, right? God has changed his ways a little bit. Has he? Book of Mormon says he'd cease to be God if he did. And that's basically, a Christian teaching that God is from all eternity to all eternity, unchanging and all-knowing and all-powerful and all-perfect and all this sort of thing. And if we look at what the Bible teaches us about, the deeds of God, they look like they're, related to jealousy, anger, all sorts of wrath that doesn't seem very, very much like a perfect being all about love is into. But as the Roman Gospels try to blend something into something where this new pacifist Messiah, which is in itself an absolute oxymoron, because a Messiah in the Jewish revolutionary cult is a military leader. Any rate, that's Christian beliefs adopted into Mormonism. They're also self-contradictory. So here we've got a God that can't figure out what to even name his church, and now we've got Joseph Smith using a magic stone used in witchcraft for treasure seeking, to find lost pirate treasure, etc., that is guarded by demon spirits, to which he is making sacrifices, slitting the throat of black animals like a black goat, a black dog, a black sheep, and marching them around a magic circle cut with a magic knife to ward off demonic entities, protecting the treasure that the seer stone tells him is in a particular location. And what we found is that in the church vaults in Utah, they had one of the seer stones used by Joseph Smith, which they now admit in the Gospel Topics essays on the church's website was both used for, what they call folk magic, because it sounds better than any, folk magic. It just doesn't sound like black magic. When you're killing, when you're sacrificing animals and people, that's black magic. But just looking into the stone, I guess we could call it folk magic. So it doesn't sound so bad. But the Book of Mormon condemns all magic and witchcraft, and yet it was supposedly translated by witchcraft, which is pretty amazing, and admitted by Mormon patriarch and apologist Richard Bushman. Yeah, anything they can do to normalize stuff that is contradictory in your mind, they will use techniques of persuasion to use. So, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. So he's using a magic rock, and he's getting the words for the Book of Mormon on it, written on the rock magically, and disappearing after he ascertains for sure that it was properly transcribed by the scribe, who was, usually Oliver Cowdery at that point, in the Whitmer home where they were doing this dog and pony show with the stone. Although Martin Harris and his wife Emma had been scribes previously. Don't know if there was the magic stone involved in those, but in front of the Whitmers there was the magic stone business going on, and a veil in between so that, no one could see the magic stone. No one could see the plates. The plates weren't even present, they say. Witnesses, including, I think, Oliver Cowdery, the Whitmers, I'm saying David Whitmer. There were no plates present. So he's just looking at a magic rock and getting the Book of Mormon off of it. Maybe he's memorizing a page that was something they had pre-written, maybe he had a photographic memory. How else could he become a master mason in 2 days, right? Without a fantastic photographic memory. At any rate, bottom line is, it's not consistent with what the church was teaching us, that he was looking through magic glasses at the plates, and no. Emma, his wife, also, I believe, stated that there were no plates present. He's just looking at his magic rock, a witchcraft rock, which is condemned in Christianity, in Judaism, and in the Book of Mormon. So, the Book of Mormon also contains all sorts of anachronisms, meaning things that are out of place in terms of their chronology. Examples are the New Testament themes that are found within the Book of Mormon. Discussions of, mercy or grace versus works and that sort of a thing, or judgment, are in there. And actually some close to or direct quotes from, New Testament characters like Peter and Paul found in the New Testament. Also naming, using the name Jesus Christ, which is a Greek, those are Greek words, and wasn't even invented. The Greek language didn't exist when this was supposed to, have gotten started. Or French, which is also in there when this says brethren et Jew at the last phrase, I believe, in the book of Jacob, which is also the same book where polygamy is condemned, including the acts of David and Solomon. Specifically, which, of course, section 132 in the Doctrine and Covenants, supposedly a revelation to Joseph Smith, says that, no, everything David did was cool except for with Uriah and Bathsheba. And these wives were given by the prophet Nathan and other prophets to David, where the Book of Mormon totally condemns everything David did with regard to relationships outside of his original wife. Major contradiction there. Okay, so the church misleading us regarding the translation process, as it's called, or purported to be, to Mormons, pretending Joseph Smith was looking at gold plates. So why did we even need gold plates if he's just looking at a magic rock and channeling anyway, right? Okay, so there's another one for us, all right? What else? Okay, so the Mormon God, the Godhead, okay, we're taught that, truth is, eternal and so forth, and there's a section in the Doctrine and Covenants where there's a couple where specifically we have phrases that are really important and pertinent to this. Section 88 tells us that, that we need to learn things by study and by faith, and it tells us, that, the nature of truth, supposedly. In section 93 verse 24 says specifically, truth is knowledge of things as they are and as they were and as they are to come, and whatsoever is more or less than this cometh of evil, or Satan, basically, right? And they talk about that. So if truth is eternal, I mean, how did yesterday's truths become today's heresy, and how did yesterday's heresy and anti-Mormon lies become today's truth? But that's what we have. And one example would be the Mormon Godhead. So what we have is a New Testament, not even just New Testament, but basically Christian doctrine of modalism, or the Trinity, which I don't even feel is supported by the Bible, found in the Book of Mormon, where we have the God there who says he is both Jesus Christ and God the Father. I'm the Father and the Son. Also, it states that, God himself shall come down among the children of men and atone for sins. Also, it states Mary is the mother of God. They changed that to Mary is the mother of the Son of God after Jesus told Joseph Smith in a revelation recorded in the Doctrine and Covenants that the Book of Mormon was translated correctly and contained the fullness of the gospel. Fullness of the gospel. There's another one. Most of the things that Mormons consider part of the fullness of the gospel are not found in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon condemns polygamy, which is a part of, celestial marriage. In Mormonism, in section 132, Joseph Smith's commanded to take multiple wives. Baptism for the dead, where you get a chance in case you didn't accept Jesus in this life. Maybe you were born somewhere or at a time when you couldn't. Christians would just have you going to hell. The Mormon God's fairer. He gives you a chance to hear the gospel through the Mormon missionaries in the spirit world and have people like me perform baptisms or be baptized for in behalf of you as proxies, right? Okay, so the Mormon God is more fair. Well, guess what? That's not in the Book of Mormon. It's part of the fullness of the gospel. Just like eternal marriage and other temple ordinances, things Mormons are most known for are not in the Book of Mormon. How come Jesus would say the fullness of the gospel is contained in the Book of Mormon and it's true, translated correctly? They change so many things in it, and the fullness of Mormonism and the gospel of Mormonism is not in the Book of Mormon. It's got Christian narratives which are out of place chronologically because, and language which is out of place chronologically. It's got words, it's got phrases, it's got verses that Joseph Smith changed in the Bible because the great and abominable church of the devil had made changes and corrupted the Bible, as the Book of Mormon tells us, especially in 1 Nephi chapter 13. So why are the corrupted verses that the abominable church of the devil changed and that are in the Bible found in the Book of Mormon and then corrected in the Bible by Joseph Smith? Yeah, I think that's pretty clear evidence of fraud, just like mistranslations or errors found in the King James Version of the Bible from like 1767 or something that the Smith family happened to have in their home at the time, and they're in the Book of Mormon. How's that happen, right? So there's tons of stuff from the Bible in the Book of Mormon, mostly from the Book of Isaiah, but other stuff as well. New Testament themes and quotes, or near quotes, that shouldn't be in there in a timeline where we're talking about from 2200 BC to 400 AD. Language, subjects, etc. that are out of place chronologically. Also, names of places that seem to correlate or very similar to places where Joseph Smith's family lived in the Book of Mormon. All kinds of just things that denote fraud are there. Yeah, ridiculous. And portions of Isaiah that were supposedly on brass plates that Book of Mormon characters brought from Jerusalem that had not yet been written according to chronological, historical, documents that we now have regarding the Book of Isaiah. So, yeah. Plagiarism and invented BS, just like we have in, say, the Book of Abraham, where it talks about being in the land of the Chaldeans. Well, the Chaldeans weren't in that area for another 1,000 years. That's a chronological error that's in the Bible. Also, mistranslation of words like Egypt or Egyptus. Egyptus is just a play on Egypt, and that's, the definition of Egypt is not what the Book of Abraham says it is. Pharaoh, being a king by royal birth, is what the Book of Abraham says it means. But of course, that's not what it means. It means like, a great house or something, right? Jesus appearing as his premortal self in Mormon theology with the name Jehovah, supposedly, 2000 BC to Abraham to save him from an altar, being sacrificed on an altar, and saying his name was Jehovah, but that name was invented by a Catholic monk, 3,300 years later or so, in like 1257 AD. That shouldn't be there, and it shouldn't be Jesus' name for his premortal spirit either, because it's an invented name by a guy who worked for the Church of the Devil, for God's sakes, right? Everything in the Book of Abraham is fraudulent. It's not, it's the papyri, were actually the Egyptian Book of Breathings. Egyptologists have translated it. We have the papyri, but Joseph Smith said it was written by the hand of Abraham, and nothing about Abraham is on that papyri. So the church says, okay, well, I guess he didn't really write it. It wasn't really by the hand of Abraham, but let's just not worry about that. Let's just say it's inspired of God, even though Joseph Smith was lying about, it being written by Abraham, and it had nothing to do with Abraham. It's just, and he creates an Egyptian alphabet interpretation of hieroglyphics, which was 100% wrong. But he did this like a con man, a showman, convincing people of his prophetic powers. People didn't have access in the United States at that time to, the Rosetta Stone, and so no one could out him. But it was all BS. So the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, now called the Community of Christ, has basically admitted that, dumped the Book of Abraham as a complete total fraud. Why don't they dump the Book of Mormon? Why don't they dump the Bible? Well, they haven't. They did a documentary on a visit to a tour of their temple with one of their high priests. When I was in Independence, Missouri, quite some time ago. I don't know, what is it, a year and a half? I don't know. 2 years ago, I think. A year ago, whatever. I did it. Okay, so that's an interesting video you might want to look at. Very interesting, I thought it was. Anyway, so here we have rewritten history after rewritten history, changed scripture. So the Mormon God is, a Trinitarian or modalist God in the Book of Mormon, and then Joseph Smith changes the nature of God. He says, no, here's what God is. God is a spirit. Just like the Bible says, right? In the New Testament. God is a spirit. Jesus Christ is a resurrected being with a body of flesh that's, glorified or whatever. And the Holy Spirit is the combined mind and will of God and Christ. Okay? Not an entity, not a spirit man, which got changed to in section 130 of the Doctrine and Covenants. God got changed and upgraded from just a spirit to catch up in Mormon theology, with himself, because otherwise Jesus is ahead of him in Mormon theology. He has been resurrected, and God the Father was just a spirit in this definition of God, which we can find in Lectures on Faith, lecture number 5, which Joseph Smith taught as the God's honest eternal truth in the to the apostles, the leading brethren of the church, in what was called the School of the Prophets. And that doctrine was in the book called Doctrine and Covenants. And the reason it was called Doctrine and Covenants, teaching the Mormon doctrine of the Godhead. Presumably the prophet only will teach truth, yet he changed it from what was in the Book of Mormon, and then changed it again in section 130 when God the Father is now a resurrected man, which goes along with the King Follett discourse, which Joseph Smith gave at the funeral of a man named King Follett. And he said God once dwelt on an earth like this and worked out his salvation, and that's what you're doing here, basically. So that wasn't something that was in Mormon scripture at that time. So then that changed. So now the Godhead, the nature of God and the Godhead changed in Mormon theology, and then we got the Doctrine and Covenants and replaced the Book of Commandments, in which there were also historical evidences, writings that were problematic for the Mormon Church when Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery invented the priesthood doctrine around 1834 or 1835, and then backdated the story to say that John the Baptist visited them while they were translating the Book of Mormon, and then Peter, James, and John visited them subsequently during that process, around 1829, before the church was organized, and gave them this priesthood authority. Meanwhile, that hadn't been what they were telling people. They had offices in the church, such as elder and 70, which had nothing to do with priesthood, and no one was ever told they had the Aaronic or the Melchizedek priesthood, even apostles, such as, let's say, William McClellan, who left the church and testified he'd never been ordained to any priesthood, just he was an apostle. But so they changed the story, then backdated information that contradicted the new narrative. And new speak was replacing old speak, to use, Orwellian language there, describing how mind control is worked on the people by changing the information and limiting the information, controlling the information that we have, controlling our actions and our thoughts, etc. in some of these cults, like Mormonism, like the Watchtower, like Scientology, and in the Roman Catholic Church. And of course, Christians don't think that are non-Catholic think that they're not involved in anything that is untruthful, but their evangelists are often Freemasons and involved in various other occult groups. So I'm not going to get into that right now. I've spent time on that kind of stuff before. And on the Secret Combinations page, I think that's a good one, where you'll find the one about Billy Graham and that sort of thing. In the website, Mormon Truth Videos, Gospel Topics Hub, there are links to all these pages on there, right? Or at least most of them. So, the website, as you're looking at one of the pages, which is the Restoring the Gospel, Restoring a Stairway to Heaven page, you can see here's a couple of videos that relate to the topic of the restoration, according to Mormonism, right? And there's, narrative, etc., explaining, my position on that and helping us to fact check. So there's another item of extreme contradiction to the narrative that this perfect God is guiding righteous brethren of the Mormon priesthood. So the Book of Abraham is totally fraud, and the Mormon Church just now admits in the Gospel Topics essays information that it doesn't, the Book of Breathings, is what, anyway, the papyri say nothing about Abraham or any of the stuff Joseph Smith says they did. They didn't come from the Book of, the Book of Abraham did not come from what Joseph Smith purchased. He just got that somewhere else, and it came from God, right? Even though there are contradictions, there are false definitions, there's, stuff in there that's just really wrong. And also, it references the facsimile, number one, and gives false definition of what those, what are they called? Those jars, right? Forgot the word for them. Anyway, they put organs in them from people, that were being embalmed, but instead we're told that that's a sacrificial table, etc. Nothing matches. And of course, there's facsimile 2 in the Book of Abraham that's got all kinds of stuff that says, here's the interpretation, and then figure 7 in the facsimile. It happens to be upside down and kind of small, but if you magnify it, if you get it a little bigger, you turn it right side up, you see it's a guy. It represents Pharaoh sitting on a chair or a throne, and he doesn't have any pants on, and he's ready for sex. Let's just say that. And that's what Egyptologists will pretty much tell us, and said he's about to get involved with one of his concubines. Well, Joseph Smith says that the bird and whatnot that's in the picture, represents the Holy Ghost, and the other one's like Abraham. So he's talking to two dudes about the grand key words of the priesthood. He's talking to the Holy Ghost, who in Mormonism is a spirit dude, not just, the combined mind and will of God in Christ anymore, since they changed that, got rid of it. And Abraham. So he's talking to two dudes about temple stuff, and the grand key words. That means, that's temple stuff having to do with the priesthood. But he's got no pants on, and he's in a state of obvious sexual excitement talking to two guys about church shit, right? So, that's impossible to reconcile. That just isn't okay. But that's what Joseph Smith said is going on there. Egyptologists, say it's Pharaoh getting ready to do one of his concubines, or something to that effect. And for instance, in the CES letter, you can see the comparison of what the Egyptologists say that various portions of these facsimiles that we've got and so forth represent. And then what Joseph Smith said they represent, which is completely different, and in this case, beyond bizarre. And pretty disgusting in my opinion. So there's some more major irreconcilable evidence, that says there is not an all-knowing, unchanging, perfect God guiding the Mormon leaders who are apparently flying by the seat of their pants if they have to keep changing stuff, covering stuff up, and changing Mormon history, changing the doctrines, meanwhile maintaining that this God has communicated eternal truths from the very beginning and can be trusted. Whereas we keep finding that, teachings get reversed and changed, and then they just tell us, well, they weren't inspired that day, where they can think they might get away with that. Other places it's beyond any possibility. But that's the apologetic narrative, is that, the prophet was just speaking as a man when he said, there are men on the moon that lived to be 1,000 years old, and they dress like the people like in Pennsylvania that are from like Germany especially, and don't like electricity, right? Of course I know who they are, and of course I'm just having a little trouble. Anyway, so that's what the men on the moon dress like, and the men on the sun, well, they're a little bit different, right? So anytime we've got something bizarre like that quoted by a Mormon prophet, well, he just was speculating as a man, right? But it's difficult when it's Joseph Smith, so they try to avoid that, and then they blame Brigham Young. They blame Brigham Young that African Negroes or people of African Negro descent weren't allowed to enter the temple or hold the priesthood. And they say, well, they blame it all on Brigham Young, but actually we find that the curse on Canaan is mentioned in the Book of Abraham also, which and cross-referenced in the LDS scripture previous to the 2013 new scriptures, to the Book of Moses in the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, where he states that the Canaanites, a blackness came upon them so that all people would despise them after they killed the people of Shum in the story there. It's where Joseph Smith basically, added stuff to the book of Genesis that wasn't already there. But he says he was just restoring stuff that the great and abominable church, the devil, which, Brigham Young, Orson Pratt, and others have identified as the Catholic Church, and it certainly describes the Catholic Church in 1 Nephi chapter 13. So, kind of a problem, right? Kind of a big problem. Is there anything in Mormonism that hasn't, that does stand up to scrutiny? Would be the better question. What we found is we've got men lying to us, men changing their story, saying that they speak for an all-powerful, all-knowing, unchanging God, and they keep changing their story and using techniques to convince us that we should obey them, trust them, etc. While they perpetrate fraud on us. We're trying to keep our end of the deal so we can have our families together forever with eternal life. And of course, the fraud is perpetrated in such a way that the fulfillment of the promised blessings are the responsibility of the invisible God in a life that is not this life. So basically, that absolves the church leaders from the obligation to fulfill their the end coming from the God they say they represent, but you are bound to them to obey them because they are agents of this God. But In other words, they can take everything that they want from you, but they don't have to deliver anything. Of course, some of the blessings we find, pronounced in the Book of Mormon as promised blessings include stuff in this life, such as a statement in the Book of Mormon says, if you keep the commandments, you will prosper in the land. So if you're not prosperous, we've got the gospel of prosperity testifying that you have hidden sins, apparently, because God isn't blessing you with prosperity. Doesn't that just work out well for the church leaders who are prosperous and many times occultists? Well, at the top levels, perhaps they all are, but the satanic bloodlines run through the church, and we have people at all levels who are part of the satanic, sacrificial rites, satanic ritual abuse and sacrifice that occurs so much, especially in Utah, by Temple Recommend holding Mormons. Temple Recommend holding Mormons whose priesthood leaders are sometimes included in that number, and whose priesthood leaders are supposedly possessing gifts of discernment, so you can't fake them out as to your righteousness when you get interviewed for worthiness about going to the temple. And yet all of these people, that are the member of the presiding bishopric interviewed, were being satanically abused by Temple Recommend holding leaders in the church, middle management, young men's leaders, young women's leaders, bishops, stake president or patriarch or ark have been named, and members of the tabernacle choir, etc., etc. Somehow all these people faked out the priesthood leaders who are supposed to have this magical discerning power as part of their priesthood keys or mantle. So, the more you look at it, the more contradiction you see, which is irreconcilable to the truth and authority claims of the church. They've lied to us and lied to us and lied to us. And it's difficult to see the forest from the trees when you're in the cult. You're told if you don't get the right answers to prayers, it's somehow your fault, you must be unworthy, that sort of thing. In fact, Mormon Apostle Dallin Oaks said the following, or close to it: worthy members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints basically don't depend on various historical stuff for a testimony. They pray and are there, then blessed to know from the Mormon God, the God of Israel, we're told, what truth is. So you have this testimony of truth, and it comes through subjective means, and if you don't get the appropriate answer, then you must not be worthy. It's your fault. That's cult mentality. So this type of mind control is used upon the members, including seminary students. In fact, I read that out of the seminary teacher's manual and put that in a video I made regarding seminary. So, and there's bees hitting my car. So, it's one mind control thing after another in the church to create circular reasoning that always ends up with, well, the church must be true, and if I don't know it, it's because I'm not living worthily. It's my fault. Okay? So a lot of Mormons are taught that the way to know truth is to pray about it. And in all of these gospel topics essays, which are essentially opportunities for the LDS Church to probably mitigate the effects of a lawsuit on fraud by disclosing that they have lied about, that there have been lies in church teachings and history, but then they will do, they don't want you to know about them, or they certainly didn't promote them on the front page of LDS.org, which is now the Church of Jesus Christ.org. And so if they say, okay, yeah, well, Joseph Smith did use a seer stone, and Joseph Smith, he was practicing, they don't call it witchcraft, folk magic with the same stone, and no, it wasn't actually written by the hand of Abraham. they weren't exactly from the Middle East, the American Indians. It's probably more like what the anthropologists tell us. Even though, of course, they're not going to mention the fact that, of course, we said that Adam was the first man on earth, the first flesh on earth in the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. But actually, the American Indians were in America before Adam, and they didn't get washed away by the flood of Noah, which is also Mormon scripture, both in the Bible and referenced basically in the Book of Ether, chapter 1, I believe, maybe 1 and 2, where it says after the flood, after the waters came, receded from the land, the Americas became a special land, a land of promise. And we were taught by Mormon, now Mormon apostle, but Mormon 70 and head of BYU, through an article approved in the church's own magazine, The Ensign, 1976, June. The article, I believe it was called A Land of Promise, talked about, God breaking up Pangea so he could surround the Americas with water, so no one, not even an indiscriminate traveler or a soldier of fortune, would happen upon the land without God bringing him here. After, that time of the flood, which didn't destroy the American Indians, it didn't destroy the Egyptians, it didn't destroy the Chinese, it didn't destroy the Akkadians, it didn't destroy the Sumerians, all of which we have some histories going through the time or evidence that they were undisturbed by a worldwide flood that left only 8 people in a boat and some animals. That's Jewish BS. It's been adopted by Christians, and it's been adopted by Mormons in Mormonism and Mormon theology and scripture, and it's, of course, contradicted by the fact that we've got American Indians here, never washed away by the flood, into which the Book of Mormon people disappeared, and we just can't find any of their DNA, even though the Book of Mormon, states that God promised them to protect the land from other people so that they could have it to themselves as long as they stayed righteous, which assumes that they were the only people here in the first place. Nevertheless, we can't find any of their DNA. They just disappeared into the DNA of all these Siberian people who pre-existed Adam, the first flesh on earth. So in other words, it's a hot, steamy pile of mastodon waste when you really examine it carefully. Mormonism is just filled with contradiction. The biblical narrative is contradicted. The biblical narrative itself is, in contradiction with historical evidence. The Book of Mormon is filled with stuff from the Bible that shouldn't be in it if the people were here writing it when they were supposed to be. I mean, it's ridiculous that people can remain members of the LDS church, or any church, but especially the LDS church, because you've got so much evidence in modern times with the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, these obvious frauds, the rewriting of the history, the doctrines that are being changed, like with regard to blacks in the priesthood. I mean, if you were a Fijian person with black skin, you could have the priesthood as of 1959. But not if you could trace directly to Africa until 1978. When Jesus changed his mind right before the São Paulo, Brazil temple was supposed to get dedicated in October. So in June, God changes his mind. Because Brigham Young said they couldn't have the priesthood till like the millennium, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. God says one thing and then, no, he didn't really say that. They just weren't inspired when they said that. You just can't use that defense in most of these situations. They can try, and it just fails. It's ridiculous. The whole thing's a fraud, and the guys at the top know that it's a fraud. They're involved in all sorts of evil beyond just conning you out of your money and your time. Harmful doctrines are causing massive amounts of depression and suicide, guilt, over normal sexual behavior, whatever normal is. It's normal to have sexual behavior, but if you're not licensed by the state for it in a marriage that is state approved and paid for. And what is a license? A license is an exception to the law. A license is an exception that you gain for something you don't have any right to do. You don't have a right to earn money. You don't have a right to work. You don't have a right to get married. You have to have licenses for all this stuff. You don't have a right to drink alcohol. You don't have a right to do anything without permission. Anything you need a license for is something you don't have a right to. So I'm not going to get into the manifest destiny doctrine too much right now, just to say, it's not, as you examine the structure, the corporate structure of countries, they're not what you think that they are. You don't have a God-given right and God-given countries and God-inspired constitutions and all the crap we read in the Book of Mormon that promotes that is just, it just falls to pieces when you fact check adequately. And so those are reasons why it's immoral for me to do anything that supports the LDS Church. That's why it's immoral for me to stay quiet. And so I am therefore an apostate, fighting against the LDS Church and the dishonesty of it, which basically puts me in the category of people that are going to hell, and probably going to hell forever, because I'm a son of perdition. I'm fighting against the Mormon Church and its leaders actively. And I'm doing so because my conscience demands me to do something about this, because it is deceit and it's horrific in its results. The number one cause of death for teenagers, ages like 11, if we can call that a teenager, 11 through 17, in Utah is suicide. The statistics that reflect, the fruits of the gospel in Mormonism in states that are heavily Mormon, for the top 10 Mormon states by percentage, are horrendous. Whether it's bankruptcy, suicide, depression, paid subscriptions to pornography. Utah, child abuse, sexual, predation, spousal abuse. And I did a video specifically on that, going over the statistical numbers. And what you find is a strong correlation between, the top 10 Mormon states and the top 9, rankings for these horrific, problems in society. Mormonism produces depression, suicide, financial insolvency, and divorce. It covers up pedophilia. And the network of pedophilia is much greater than most people have any awareness, and the involvement of churches and church leaders in various churches who are part of an esoteric group with a religion that is much different from what they teach exoterically to the members of these cults, who are fooled and made to be revenue sources while being programmed to obey their respective governments, which are owned by the same process of corporate investment, and have members of the secretive societies in positions of leadership throughout them. So Mormonism is a microcosm of a much larger dominance of most of the common people by an elite group of people who use this priestcraft to program people to obey their government leaders by deifying offices of government in republics, or deifying kings and pharaohs in kingdoms, where they're actively still teaching the doctrine divine kingship. So those are subjects for other videos, and I guess I've probably said enough in this one. There are so many other things that I could discuss which contradict that narrative, but for me, sharing those few with some perspective as to how I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and yet overcame the spiritual manipulation and through confirmatory experiences that I had, yet, I cannot ignore the fact that we've been lied to, and that the theology is filled with contradiction, and that our leaders at the top levels are completely aware of this and benefiting and profiting heavily in the highest paid positions, while of course we are indoctrinated that we have an unpaid laity. There are plenty of jobs that are unpaid, such as bishop at this point. When I say at this point, if you do enough historical reading, you can see where bishops and stake presidents were actually getting a cut of the tithing collected. That's no longer the case. Patriarchs were paid on a per blessing, basis. If you're getting $1 a blessing at the time when you can buy an acre of land for $7, that ain't a bad gig. And Joseph Smith provided that for his dad, and then his brother. So it's a great racket if you don't have a conscience. If you do, it's immoral to support Mormonism, and it's the right thing to do to out it for what it really is. And for that, Mormonism teaches that guys like me, if I'm a son of perdition, meaning denying the Holy Spirit, which I say, if you gain a testimony that the church is what it says it is, or a testimony, from spiritual feelings or whatever, that the scriptures are true when they contradict each other, then obviously this Holy Ghost is not either a dependable source of truth only, but he is a liar because he's testifying to things that contradict other things he's testifying are true. So put that in your pipe or your bong and smoke it, contemplate it, and realize you got to get out of this church. I'm Dodger Dave, and I hope you enjoyed this. And if you feel inspired to go to the link, go down to my links, check them out, use the resources, share them. You got to share these, okay? I'm kind of shadow banned if you hadn't noticed on YouTube and so forth. There are Mormon interests well represented within the Google companies, I'm sure, and the algorithms can be adjusted to make it more difficult to find videos that have information they don't want you to find. So, yeah, I appreciate financial donations. I appreciate sharing videos and the website, and commenting and subscribing, doing those things proactively, because people need to know this stuff, and lives are affected and gained or lost by what we do and what we don't do with information that we have. Take care. Okay, so this is the outro for the third segment, and I'll be putting that together tonight because I've had to divide the video up regarding LDS, my LDS conversion and deconversion through fact-checking LDS truth and authority claims, and the practical experience I had in studying and living as a Mormon for 32 years. Working for the LDS Church and having various callings, including one where I ran a bookstore and had, between that and working for the church, had a lot of access to materials
that were teaching LDS doctrine, and that's one of the reasons I've got some of the stuff that I have, but a lot went into my head as I listened to cassette tapes day after day as I was working in the LDS church. And like I said, with Bookstore, I ordered anything I wanted to take a look at and sold it if I didn't want to keep it, and purchased it at wholesale if it was something I wanted to add to my library. So as a self-directed student of the LDS church, I learned a lot, and I noticed a lot of contradiction within the LDS teachings, changing teachings, covered up, whitewashed history, dishonesty, mind control, and the damage done to families, including mine, by adherence to the belief that these men were guided by a deity that created us for a purpose of gaining eternal life and becoming gods if we'd just obey everything they said and pay. And pay I've done, unfortunately, with my family. The great irony there, of course, being the fact that the family, strengthening the family for time and for all eternity, is the hub of marketing the LDS Church as a value for families. And in fact, what we find is it destroys families through the means that most cults do. Adherence and allegiance to the cult over your family.
Now, I've made quite a few videos, well, maybe around 500, on the subject of Mormonism and outing the LDS Church for its dishonesty, harmful teachings, and mind control. This one I'm making as I'm on a trip to begin trying to regain relationships with loved ones, children that were taken away out of my life when I had a nervous breakdown, which I believe had a lot to do with the amount of stress I was living under, living LDS teachings. Also, the teachings now taught to my youngest child make me irrelevant for all eternity because I'm not an active member of the LDS Church. In fact, I'm aligned in the minds of Mormons who believe the doctrine that's taught in the church with the devil, because I'm telling the truth about the leaders and the doctrines. So the destruction of the family is basically made sure when you apostatize. You're associated with Satan in the minds of those who remain believing in the LDS Church as the vehicle for the Israelite God to bring godhood to his children. You can be shunned. You can be, my LDS lawyer son has apparently convinced his children that I'm an untrustworthy person. He wouldn't want them trusting someone who would teach them that Mormonism is false and that they are, being misguided. So he has told them I'm not trustworthy, or he doesn't believe that I am trustworthy. And of course, they're going to believe that because they believe Daddy. So I don't have a relationship with those grandchildren either, because I don't believe that Russell M. Nelson is guided by an all-knowing, unchanging, and righteous God. Okay, well, I hope everybody enjoyed that, and please check out the Mormon Truth Videos Gospel Topics Hub links down below, where you'll have all sorts of individual pages that have got both the narrative and videos that are appropriate for those topics, whether it's the first vision, whether it's race and priesthood, gospel topics essay, whatever it is. I've got videos that are appropriate for that subject in those pages, linked to my YouTube channel. So, of course, there are a lot more videos on the YouTube channel, but it's a great resource. And also, if you can be able to help support my efforts, and survival. There's my GoFundMe link down there. Currently, I'm helping to dethrone or declaw the governor of Michigan, who's destroying the middle class businesses, deeming them, of course, almost all as non-essential, while the large corporations, of course, just by coincidence, nothing to worry about, they're essential. Yeah. So she's excluded the legislator from participating in government, so the people have no representation out here. So I'm here to help rescind the Emergency Powers Act of the governor of 1945, trying to fight for the people. And yeah, I've got car problems and no money, pretty much. So all help would be appreciated. Thanks.